Shalom, Eliyah Navi, Elijah the prophet. Peace be unto you, for the kingdom of heaven has come near unto thee. I'm watching for the Lord. I hope you're watching for the Lord. The days of Noah. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the days of Noah. But as in the days of Noah were, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. These are the words which Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah, as recorded by the Apostle Matthew 24:37 through 39. When he spoke to his disciples of what the last days would be like, we don't know a great deal about all the things people were doing in those days. Not everything that transpired before the flood. We don't know a great deal about all the things people were doing in those days, nor everything that transpired before the flood. But there are several facts which the reader should be aware that can be gathered from the Holy Scriptures. The first fact is that, according to the above passage, people were heavily into food and marriage. Of course, neither of these is in its. The point seems to be that they were so given to these things and to the cares of this life, they completely forgot about seeking their Creator. The same can be said about this time in which we live. Indeed, Yeshua, Jesus, told us specifically that in the end, the inhabitants of the world would be snared by surfeiting, overindulgence, drunkenness, and the cares of this life. And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and cares of this life, so that the day come upon you unaware. For as a snare shall it come upon all of them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. Luke 21:34-35. A quick glance at this consumer society should make us aware of how fully this prophecy is coming to pass before our eyes. When one considers the host of food chain restaurants, supermarkets, and general fullness of bread abounding on the one hand, and the multitude accounts of divorce and remarriage on the other, it becomes clear that this generation is giving itself over unto these very things. A member of our fellowship recently met a man whose first marriage lasted 5 years, his second 9 years, and whose third was now in its 6th year. It is increasingly common to find people in their 4th and 5th marriage. The second fact is that the people of Noah's day were corrupt. In Genesis 6:12, we are told, "And Elohim, God in Hebrew, looked upon the earth and beheld it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth." Evidently, the effects of seeking first the things of the flesh was corruption, even as the Apostle Paul wrote, "For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, but he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting." Galatians 6:8. So it is today. Most in this society are given over to sowing to the flesh, worshiping the body, and seeking to perfect their expertise in unrighteousness. And the fruit of this endeavor is the corruption that we see all about us at so many levels. The third fact is that few were saved. Only Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives, a total of 8 persons. Even so, in this time, Yeshua, Jesus, has told us that few will find the narrow way. The few will find the narrow way that leads to life. Most will follow the broad way to destruction. Enter ye in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. Because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. Matthew 7:13-14. Then one said unto him, Adon, Lord, are there few that be saved? And he said unto them, Strive to enter in at the strait gate, For many, I say unto you, will seek to enter in, and shall not be able. Luke 13:23-24. The third fact is that Noah was a preacher of righteousness. Even though the world was so corrupt, see 2 Peter 2:5, Noah did not simply build an ark, but for many years he spoke to the world about what was right. And not only did he preach righteousness, but he lived it as well. In Genesis 6:8, we see that Noah found grace in the eyes of Yahweh, the Lord in Hebrew. This is the first record we have of someone receiving grace, which is exactly what is needed to live righteously in a Resha, ungodly world. For the grace of Elohim, God, that bringeth salvation hath appeared to all men, teaching us that denying Rasha, ungodliness, and worldly lusts, we should live soberly, righteously, and chassid, godly. In this present world, Titus 2:11-12. Let us have grace whereby we may serve Elohim, God, acceptably, with reverence and chassid fear, godly fear. Hebrews 12:28. Both the prophet Ezekiel in the Old Testament and the Apostle Paul in the New Testament made reference to Noah's righteousness. Surely it was the grace of Elohim God that enabled him to withstand the corruption of his day. The third fact is that the world in general had no real interest in salvation. It seems their minds were on other things. Noah no doubt warned them and told them that Yahweh, the Lord, was doing, but hardly anyone hearkened. Yeshua, Jesus, told us that they knew not until the flood came and took them all away. Matthew 24:39. They did not know that the judgment of Yahweh, the Lord, was coming. See Proverbs 28:5. They weren't aware of what was going on. If they had listened to Noah, they would have known and been prepared. But again, they were too caught up in the cares and corruption of their world to pay attention to the message of Elohim, God. The sixth fact is the world in Noah's time had become violent. In Genesis 6:11, it tells us, the earth also was corrupt before Elohim, God, and the earth was filled with violence. Evidently, their corrupt state led them into this violence. This, of course, is also true of the time in which we live. It seems that in the beginning of the 20th century, 21st now, century, some believed that modern technology and the human mind would bring about some sort of utopia. However, that was actually produced. However, what was actually produced has been an age of godlessness and unprecedented violence. Many today cannot deal with the differences without resorting to violence and or slanderous accusations. Years ago, when many children were raised with scriptures, there was more understanding about using a soft answer, as it says in Proverbs 15:1. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. That sort of thing is mocked at today. There are those who will answer this by saying that there has always been evil and that violence and wrongdoing have only increased about proportionately with the population. This is dishonesty, however, and it is easily refuted by even a brief look at the records. For example, in 1900, the population of the United States was a little over 76 million. And yet, during that year, about 230 homicides were reported to have occurred. By 1960, the population somewhat more than doubled to about 180 million. But the number of murders recorded in 1960 was about 8,500, an increase of over 36 times. Between 1960 and 1980, the population rose by about another 26% to roughly 227 million. And yet the number of murders in 1980 was almost triple that of 1960. Accounts of rape and aggravated assault were about quadrupled, and the amount of robberies had increased by more than 5 times. Only by an earnest exercise in willing ignorance could one compare this time with that of, say, 3 decades ago, not discerning an alarming increase in evil on almost every front: drug use, child abuse, sodomy, divorce, occult practices, and on and on. The seventh fact is that the judgment of Elohim, God, did come, just as he promised. Seeing the word of Yahweh, the Lord, has always been correct in what it predicts, and that this time conforms so precisely to the state that the scriptures have foretold, one can only wonder if people's efforts to be willingly ignorant of Elohim's, God's judgment to come. Let me read that again. The seventh fact is that the judgment of Elohim, God, did come, just as he promised, seeing that the word of Yahweh, the Lord, has always been correct in what it predicts, and that this time conforms so precisely to the state that the scriptures have foretold, one can only wonder at people's efforts to be willingly ignorant of Elohim's, God's, judgment to come. Please see Matthew 24, 3 through 12, Luke 17, 26 through 30, and 2 Timothy 3, 1 through 5. For some examples of verses speaking of the state of the last days, and Isaiah 66, 15, 16, 2 Thessalonians 1, 7 through 10, and 2 Peter 3, 19 through 12, for verses related to the coming judgment. Surely a deep sleep has fallen upon people that they are able to, let me reread that. Surely a deep sleep has fallen upon people that they are able to live as the scriptures say they would in the end. To watch the end times prophecies being fulfilled before their very eyes and yet deny that it is happening. Instead, many folks make remarks to the effect that it's coincidental or that the similarities are exaggerated. Where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. 2 Peter 3:4. This scoffing attitude towards Elohim's judgment was itself anticipated in the New Testament. See 2 Peter 3, 3 through 7. Snuggled in their agnosticism, the world doesn't seem to realize that they are fulfilling end-time prophecy even as they forsake faith in Elohim. Luke 18:8. Thus, it is important to awake to righteousness. The more numb this world becomes to their conscience, the further they will sink into corruption. The more corrupt they become, the more their conscience will be seared. We must therefore seek to go the other way, getting our hearts right for the coming of Yeshua, Jesus, even as Noah prepared for the promise of judgment in his day. Shalom and aloha. Peace be unto you. I'm watching for the Lord. Are you watching for the Lord? Are you? I am.